Ladies and gentlemen, we may have a new strongest female chess player in the world. Now, I know what you're going to say. Levy, you just made a video about Judith Polgar. Isn't she the GOAT? Also, Hou Yifan's ranked number 1. What are you talking about? Well, neither one of them is playing chess anymore. Judith Polgar retired many years ago, and Hou Yifan effectively retired since the age of 24. She hasn't played top-level chess in many years. Also, I edited this part in after I recorded the rest of the video, and that part's about to change. The woman that I'm talking about is Russian player Aleksandra Goryachkina. She just completed a tournament in Russia known as the Higher League, where she scored 6.5 points out of 9 in a male-dominated section. And she, with that score, now qualified to play the Russian Super Final. So she's going to play against Nepo, Dubov, Karyakin, you name it. In this video, I'm going to take you through 3 of her wins in this event. She also became the first woman in a long time, I believe the 6th one ever, to cross the 2600 club. And at the end, we'll talk about all of the rating accomplishments and everything. And also her whole journey. It's actually kind of inspiring. And she's also the women's world champion runner-up. So she lost as the challenger. But anyway, timestamps on the video player. You all know the drill. Her first match that we're going to look at is around 6th round, I believe, against Aleksandra Dreev, who's one of the strongest Russian players ever. Goryachkina has a super uncompromising style. And the opening that we have is a semi-Slav defense where white plays the move bishop g5. This is the critical move. It's the move chosen by engines. You apply some pressure to this knight, and there's many variations where after knight d7, rather than knight d7, black actually, in many cases, will take on c4 and play b5. But here, Dreev plays h6, prompting the question to the bishop. Goryachkina takes and plays e3, and we have g6. And basically, after both sides castle, black says, I have the bishop pair, you have more development, you have more central space, what are you going to do about it? And Goryachkina says, well, I don't really know why you're talking to me in the middle of a tournament game, but knight to e5. Now, the whole point of this move is that should this knight ever arrive on d7, you're not going to take. That's not what you want. You play knight e5 to go f4. This is white's whole point, to take even more space, and if there is a trade, to take with a pawn and open up the f-file, and white is doing very well. And you'll notice that actually Goryachkina does exactly that. In fact, she does that without even taking back on c4. Dreev brings the queen back, so it's not a target. Now knight to e4. She is still delaying taking this, because if black spends time defending his pawn, this is terrible. White plays this undermining pawn move, and after something like cb3, actually both of these moves are probably okay, but even something like this, white is a pawn down, but is about to absolutely clamp down on the queen side. Like, nothing is going to be able to move over there. So instead of that, Dreev plays b6. Goryachkina wins back the pawn with the rook by staying patient, and now the whole position explodes with the move c5. He opens up the position. She takes. He attacks the rook. She centralizes, knight c6, and now we have a tense standoff in the center of the board. Who's going to go where? Who's going to fire first? Goryachkina takes the pawn, giving away the knight, and sacrifices her rook to get the bishop, check, king h7. She picks up the knight. He goes here, and once the dust settles, we have this position where white has a bishop and, a knight and 2 pawns for the rook. Now you would say, well, why didn't she take? Well, because here black would have taken the pawn first with check, and then would have taken the knight. And actually, by the way, even taken the bishop. In fact, taking the bishop probably just wins the game, because rook and knight is hanging. You can go here and try to get out like this, but black is not going to do that. Black will probably take your pawn or something. So instead of that, she goes for this position, and her purpose here is that in a perfect world, she will continue to create threats on this pawn. Opposite colored bishops favor the attacking player. So let's see if she can justify this. Now, she's going to need a balance here of either creating an attack or first coordinating all her pieces perfectly. She plays h3 and b3, making sure that a lot of her pawns are on light squares to get out of the way of the enemy pieces. This bishop now is useless in attacking. This is all very solid, and once the knight moves and the pawns get rolling, white is going to be very happy. Now, we have a trade of rooks. So Dreev goes for an exchange of rooks, negating and eliminating one of white's most important pieces. Queen c6, queen e2 continues to hold everything, and actually an invitation to exchange queens. Now, at this point, white is potentially just relying on the fact that this position's not lost. So, for example, if black attacks the bishop, you go here. If black gives a check, you go here. And if black makes this move, white gets a perfect setup. And what I mean by that is this kind of a position. Anytime you have a bishop versus a rook, especially in situations with symmetrical structures of pawns like this, A, B, A, B, if you can find a way to corral all of your pawns on the same color as your bishop, you have an indestructible structure. So this is completely fine, and the only person that can win this is white, because white has a 4-on-2. So white will just push all the pawns forward and hope for the best. That's really the point. So Goryachkina has this state of mind, and here gives away this e3 pawn to win the pawn on g6. So now both sides have traded off one more pawn. It's 3-1 now. Queen to e6, queen d2, bishop f6, and this very nice move, bishop f7. This is a deflection move of queen defending the rook. Dreev here cannot play a queen move. If he plays queen e7, he gets forked. And if you both lose material like this, white is just up 2 pawns. So instead, he goes for bishop h4, counterattack. Takes here, and we have a mass simplification into an endgame where white is simply up 2 pawns. Now, this is holdable, maybe. White still needs to keep the pawns together and advance correctly. There are endgames where 2 pawns versus 0, like if all these pawns disappeared, 2 pawns versus 0 is a draw in opposite colored bishop endgame. So Goryachkina needs to be very precise. She's slowly, very slowly and methodically, I'm going quickly, but she played this move slowly. She doesn't advance anything just yet. Now she plays g4, king f6, king e4. Bishop c4, very, very slowly. King d5. So she's heading over here potentially. Maybe the bishop's going to have to keep this defended. Again, it also comes down to the fact that there is this inherent imbalance. Like, if white had a way to break the imbalance of structure and just get a pass pawn, white would be winning. But it's not so easy to do. Okay, bishop e3, bishop c2, and now h4. At the critical moment, this move h4, and a very tough decision for black. Do you take or do you not? For example, if you do not take, then white at some point will break through with the pawns. But bishop h4, king b6, and Dreev hopes to defend this endgame, but the problem for him is that this is still very difficult to defend. And, you know, she slowly advances. Look at this, slowly at a 2-sided advancing. He maintains the pressure with the bishop, but the problem is that the pawn is coming. That's what I said. It was very important for Goryachkina to get the king over to the pawn and deflect the bishop away at the right moment. You'll notice right here, she was also happy to give away this pawn. Maybe this was the way that Dreev should have played and had GH instead of FG. Right? Maybe instead of taking the H pawn, he had to take the F pawn, but it's still practically very difficult to defend with A3 and B4 coming. But this might have been the right way to do it. But she wins a very clutch game, sacrificing the exchange for complications versus Dreev. And I'll jump ahead now to game number 8. And actually, I realized that I had jumped ahead a little bit in this game. So luckily, nothing was spoiled. Just scratch that. Now, Aleksandra Predke. This is a matchup of Aleksandra and Aleksandra. I mean, it literally doesn't get more Russian than this. Predke is someone to watch. It's actually funny, I just got off a video call with my coach. I just did a lesson and he said that to me. And I've known about Predke for some time. He, before the pandemic, was like 2,600, which is good, but now he's nearing 2,700, like in the span of a year. Very talented Russian player. And Goryachkina plays d4, and he employs this setup. This is by the way in the course, in my g6 course. So clearly Predke, an owner of the Gotham G6 course. No, I don't want to insult the guy. I don't want to, insult him. And listen, he is very well versed in these positions. Basically, the point is that knight c6 is also an option as well to target the center. And Goryachkina here has the option to just turn this into an e4 position, but she turns this into a 3-pawn position, and we have a very locked structure. And basically, black has delayed the move knight f6 because black actually has no intention of playing knight f6. Black decides to put the knight on e7. We have castles, a knight f3, sorry. We have castles, and h6. Very imbalanced structure already. I mean, e-pawns have been traded, white has more central space, but it's actually black who's trying to instigate on the king side without developing. Now, Goryachkina does not need a second invitation to go party. She plays h4. She's like, let's go. You want to have some fun? You want to push those pawns in front of your king? I'm calling your bluff. If you take, your knight is never getting out over here. You're going to maybe have to sacrifice a pawn for activity. But he plays g4. And then f5. And, like, this is very committal play. almost non-Russian. I mean, this is super anti-positional here. Black trying to get advancement. She reroutes the knight to the center to fight for the complex of squares. He goes here, she goes here, he goes here, and she plays this very smart move in this position. What is the smart move, folks? Simple positional improvement. Now, you've moved your knight a few times already, so maybe you think I keep moving and I go for the bishop pair. Not the worst thing in the world, but this gives black time to get a perfect coordination and potentially keep rolling. No, folks, you play the move h5. This move, I cannot stress how important it is, because now black will not get to take more kingside space, and black will not get to easily play this knight to g6. So Predke continues to try to get his knight into the game by virtue of knight to f6. She plays knight ce2. I would have liked to see queen c2 here, putting a little pressure on this pawn, but knight e2 also makes sense. And here Predke flies in on the other side of the board with the dynamite b5. Now, he could have just been very simple here. 2 bishops, what else? And play like rook b8 and slowly build this up. But he says my knight is better than this bishop, and I'm jumping in with my horsies. She plays bishop to c3, targeting the knight. Now he goes here, but this whole maneuver by Predke to go here, 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 it looks smart, and he's a strong player, so you gotta respect it. But this transformation is not really what he wanted. And if you think about it, if he was trying to get rid of the light-squared bishop for a knight, we go back a few moves, why didn't he just get rid of the light-squared bishop like this and go for that queenside plan, or potentially bring his knight in now? I don't know. I don't know, Predke. I didn't ask. Instead, he tried to do it this way with the sacrifice of the queenside pawn, but she very easily just chop, chop, and jumps in with the knight, and now she's getting another piece off the board. I mean, when you're up a pawn, it kind of makes sense to trade some pieces. And now she goes here. Now, black has no pawn mobility. This is so important. She's killed off all of black's pawn movement. And if you're not going to chip away at your opponent's position with pawns, what are you even doing? Like, you would think, oh my god, this is so scary. Well, no, it's not. I mean, just because the queen is hanging out by the king's house, if the king's got bodyguards, it's completely fine. And the knight covers anything coming here. And in a perfect world, oh my god, bishop d7, bishop e8, bishop h5, and then I take, and then rook takes, and then mate. Yeah, but we just like did 6 moves for black, and also we allowed black to checkmate us. So how does that really work, right? So instead the bishop goes here to try to win back this, but unfortunately that comes with the loss of the g-pawn, queen e8. Now, for just about a move, she's up 2 pawns. He gets one of them back, but now the switch is flipped. Knight f5. Wait a minute. I thought this whole time black was trying to attack white. Why is white threatening mate in 1? Queen goes here, and now a nice style points move. She finds a way to simplify the position on her terms. Now, if she had just taken, and rook takes, and again went up 2 pawns, this is actually almost losing for white. Almost losing. Like, you're very lucky to defend this. It's never too late to throw, folks. 1 pawn move. Remember I talked about pawn mobility? E3, you're threatening rook takes g2 here, and mate, that is ladder mate in the middle of a game. You are threatening e2. So this is very dangerous. The only way to get out of this is to sacrifice the rook and play like here. And you're just surviving by virtue of this fork. And, you know, even here, e2 is still good with the idea to go rook d1. Very dangerous position. So she does it on her terms by winning tempi, or tempo, queen to g6. And she checks, she trades on her terms, and now rook takes bishop. But the difference is if this, then check. So now Predke is forced to take the knight instead, and rather than rushing in with this, where she's not up any material, she takes the pawn with check. She maintains the 1 pawn advantage, doubles up the rooks. He tries to create a little counterplay, but the problem is that Predke has 4 pawn islands. Like, lost in all of this, in his, right, this takes us all the way back to his opening choice. It was a very dynamic choice, but the problem is that the way white plays against this is if white isolates, splits the pawns, they're always going to be long-term liabilities, and as the game progressed through the middle game, she chopped at the right moment, at the right time, made the right positional transformation. Now Predke's got 4 pawn islands, and that is very bad. They are wounded lone soldiers in a forest, and now she can trade 1 pair of rooks. Folks, if you're trying to win an endgame with 2 rooks on the board, and you are the side pushing, you gotta trade rooks. 1, not both. That is generally the rule of thumb, because it's very difficult for the defensive rook It's very easy for the offensive rook. She plays a4 to stabilize. He plays this, and now a very cool, calm, and collected king f1. Take my pawn, I don't care. Oh, you're not going to take my pawn? Well, now I'm up 2 pawns, and I got passers. I stabilize. You can jump in with the rook, but the game is over after rook c7. If you take, I take. I'm still up 2 pawns, and I've got AB, and they are rolling. And she beats Aleksandra Predke in a game that was more or less decided by the imbalanced opening and the very, very risk-taking approach here with b5. And maybe he just felt very, very compelled to play for a win. He could have kind of kept it a bit more closed here and slowly built this up, but he went for it, and she refuted it, and very convincing victory. Now, the last game that I wanted to show you all was her game against Sarana. Now, he's an up-and-comer, I mean, okay, up-and-comer is a stretch, but he's a youth player. He's like, I believe, 20, 21 years old, maybe a little bit younger, climbing those ranks, along with Yesipenko, who's very strong. Now, this one is a Nimso Indian defense, so she goes for the main line, and here there's a few ways to play. Queen c2, e3 are the 2 main lines. She goes here. And rather than stopping the move e4, which is the entire point, Sarana just says, go ahead, take it all, and now we have a very theoretical line. I actually was under the impression that this line is a draw. I thought this was a forced draw, but maybe they took some deviations. So e5, the knight jumps in, the bishop attacks the knight so that the knight takes here, and bishop h7 and takes. That doesn't happen. Instead, black loads up on the center. Knight f3, now the center explodes. cd4, knight d4, and you would think dc4, but then just this, and this is a very bad transformation for black, because black's queen gets locked in the middle with the rest of the pieces. So instead of that, knight d7, bishop f4, knight c5, castles. This has actually, I think, all been played many, many times before. Takes, 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 here, takes, takes, rook d1, bishop b7, f3 to kick the knight out, and this. Okay, so 6 pawns per player, opposite colored bishops. Someone is going to get checkmated on g2 or g7. This game is going to most likely have violence. There is way too much imbalance. So Sarana plays queen c4. Now that is a very nice square for a queen. She plays rook b1 because she doesn't want the queen on that square. Now, she is also straight up allowing Alexei to take this pawn. Like, go ahead. Go ahead and take it. And I'm assuming what she was going to do is go start some sort of attack over there. Maybe even in the long run, transfer this rook. Now, he doesn't bite. He actually doesn't do anything of that nature. And now, folks, when you leave a grandmaster unattended, what move will they play? Very good. h4. Whether the position demands it or not. Now, at first the computer's like, h4 is a terrible move! But then the computer starts to think and goes, actually, yeah, like, how do you deal with this advancement? Now, if black were to play h5, you would think h4, h5. I mean, this is a big concession. Because now, if this queen ever gets there, the only way you can protect this is by going g6, which drastically and irreparably damages your dark squares. Dark squares, light squares. Yeah, so she plays rook d7, and Alexei goes for this. The problem with this is that it doesn't weaken your dark squares, but now it's just a target for sacrifice. I mean, y'all know, getting those 2 pawns off the board is super nice. So she plays rook b4. Now he has to take on a2. Rook d2, where's the queen going? If the queen hangs out and gives a check, this only helps white, because now the king is out of danger. If the queen goes here to kind of maintain and put some pressure, well, now she's ready to sacrifice. Takes, takes. Now here, queen c1 is a little bit of a nagging problem. It looks annoying. But Alexei apparently had to play this instead. And the queen hits everybody on this square. And here the computer says that after knight to c6, threatening rook g4 mate, the only way to protect is f5. And if en passant, well, now the rook covers everything, and black can survive this. In fact, black is better. Now he did this, and I guess his logic was like, haha, she cannot move. And now I will play f5. The problem is that even though rook g4 is stopped and she can't move the rook or the queen, she doesn't need to. She can just attack with the knight. So, what's going on? Queen f8 is a threat with the knight, right? So you got to take. If you take this or this, queen f8. So knight e6. Now queen e6 moves out of the way, and you're no longer pinned, and this rook is hanging. So of course black moves this rook out of the way. But now rook to d7. This is a problem, and this is a problem. If you play something like bishop c8 in this position, thinking you're so clever, then I check you, you move, and I take your rook. And you lose. So her attack was successful. Now queen to g5 comes back to guard everything. She takes the bishop. She's up 2 pawns. Now, she's up 1 pawn because this takes with check. But here, and white is just up a pawn. And the thing is that white does not have to win this game by checkmate. White can trade 1 rook. Now, white could trade queens, but you got to be very sure you are winning this endgame. And it's better if you're the attacking side not to trade queens if you're not 100% sure. And now, she just goes for the attack. He takes. Rook e1 check, king f2, rook is hanging, queen is hanging, rook g4 is a mate threat, and Sarana resigns. She goes 5 for 5 in this tournament with the white pieces. Now, I showed you 3 games, but she went 5 for 5 with the white pieces. And that, I mean, that's crazy. The only person that beat her out of 9 games, and I wanted to show this game out of respect, she had the black pieces, and she went for a Berlin. And I'm showing this from white side because this is the only guy that beat her the entire tournament, Pavel Pankratov, and it's actually fitting because he won first place. So the guy who managed to outplay Goryachkina in an endgame that was very complex, it was bishop pair for black in a Berlin, but because white has 2 pieces that can fight for the dark squares, and look at how many pawns control dark squares. So Pankratov took a very interesting strategic approach and basically just played on the dark squares all the way down to the endgame. Like, she tried to get aggressive, and he, a few moves later, ended up calling her bluff. She just left this pawn there. And her logic was, he can take it, but I've got counterplay on the light squares. Pankratov was not so generous. He did not allow any sort of counterplay, completely negating Goryachkina's aggressive style. And he won a very long, grinding positional game, trading off rooks. And the way you win an opposite-colored bishop endgame, as we saw her win against Dreev, is you need to have 2 flanks of attack. It's very likely you need to win with 2 flanks. And notice, he's not trading the queens yet. So there's a whole nother thing here of getting mated that you need to worry about. In fact, it comes to light right here when he plays this absolutely ludicrous bishop sacrifice. He found a couple of incredible moves in this game. The point is that after c takes b6, a b6, queen d7, preventing queen c7 mate, the concept of the 2 pawns is again seen when the king cannot prevent both from queening. Isn't that incredible? Look at this, e6. And the king is not equipped to fight off both pawns in the rectangle, right? The square, the rule of the square, but neither is the bishop. So he finds this absurd bishop move and ends up grinding it down. And like I said, it ultimately comes down to the fact that you have 2 areas of attack. And he focused down the middle, cut off the queen, and ultimately won the game by virtue of the a-pawn and bishop g3. The king got stuck, and here Goryachkina resigned. I mean, it takes a monumental effort to beat someone who's on fire like Goryachkina. So, and by the way, for my non-Russian speakers, Goryachia, like when we say горячо or you say something like that in Russian, that means hot. Like, say, oh, it's like горячий чай, hot tea. By the way, if there's Russian speakers, my viewers, если вы не знали, я говорю по-русски. Вообще мой первый язык. Я его здесь выучил. So, in case anybody doesn't know, that's why I'm the Russian translator for those that might be unfamiliar. But yeah, it's like funny, like her chess was on fire, Goryachkina. I mean, what a fitting name. So, in this event, after she defeated Sarana, she crossed 2,600. Now, I promised you at the end that I would talk a little bit about her career. And actually, when I saw this was inspiring to me. I hope it would be inspiring to you. So, her official rating for the month is 2596. She's now like 2,610, I believe. Look at her rating progress chart. She crossed 2,400 for the first time in 2013 January. She is born in 1998. She was 15. She was 2,400 for like 2 years at least. But she has been, look at this, 2016 she crossed, 2015, 2016, she just crossed to 2,600. I mean, it took her 6 years. 6 years to get 100 points. In fact, she went all the way down to 2450. And then she went up. And then she hit 2530. And she went back down to 2504. Slow progression. I mean, it takes time. And the most fun part to me about this, and by the way, these are the top women in the world. So she is the strongest active female chess player on Earth right now, for sure. Because Hoi Fan might be 2660, but she has not played in a long time, and I don't know if she's coming back. We don't know. She played recently in this online rapid event, didn't perform probably up to her expectations, and professional chess at the highest level requires full-time dedication. So we might have, far and away, our strongest female chess player in the world. Now, this is interesting. The 2500 club for women is basically the 2700 club for men in terms of how many people you see there. And hopefully in the future, these ladies get up to the 26 and 2700. And I've talked in many, many videos about the gender gap in chess. I've talked about it, very open about it. But another player in this event who did extremely well is Polina Shuvalova, and I probably will feature her in another video. She also got 14th out of, she also had a very good event. She got 14th despite being the 28th seed, and she gained 18 points. She's the 11th strongest female chess player in the world. She's 2506, and also from Russia. And these two, besides Katerina Lagno, are the Russian players here in the top 13. So big congratulations to Goryachkina. She came up short in her quest for the World Championship, Women's World Championship, but that has clearly not deterred her, and I think this is just the beginning, because now, like I said, she qualifies for that for the super final, for the Russian Championship. Nepo, maybe not Nepo because he's World Championship, but at least if it's before the World Championship. But Dubov, Karyakin, Inarkiev, I mean, Grishuk can play, Svidler can play, so many top players. Very curious to see where it goes, but as always, I always want to feature the players that are blossoming in their careers and doing great things and breaking records. And if you just take one last look at that list, folks, one last look at that list, she's 22 years old! Shuvalova is 20. Abdumalik is 20. She's 22! The sky's the limit! And on that note, I hope this is a feel-good video for all of you, and we wish Goryachkina all the best, and hopefully we'll feature some more of her games in the future as we see her in these top events. Peace out! Get out of here.